Hey party people! In this video, I'm going to talk about the difference between spec sheets and size charts and show you all about measuring bodies and clothes, male and female, to create spec sheets and size charts. Please give this video a thumbs up if you want more videos centered around garment construction like this one. Reminder, I come from a design background. This video, in my point of view, comes from designing clothes in the fashion industry, meant to be mass produced and sold, but I do hope that this video can be of benefit to anyone making clothes. Okay, in order to produce multiples of clothes, you need to create a tech pack for each garment. Tech packs are multi-document, just like multi-page documents that detail every element of a garment, from the fabrics and the trims to where the labels are sewn in to the size of the pockets. And I have a whole playlist on tech packs. I'll link that in the description box. And I also sell tech pack templates, so blanks of all the forms you need in a tech pack, that you can buy at shop.zoehong.com. So anyway, moving on. A spec sheet is really an important part of any tech pack. Spec is short for specification, and sometimes spec sheets are called measurement sheets because that is what they are. Spec sheets list every single measurement of a garment: center front, inseam, pocket width, pocket length, and depth, and hip circumference, hem circumference, everything. Okay? And we will go over these in detail throughout this video. Clothing specs are not the same as body measurements or those size charts you see on shopping websites. Okay, those charts should have body measurements. So when a chart says their medium bust is 38 inches, that doesn't mean that the chest measurement of their medium shirt is 38 inches. It means it should fit a person with a 38-inch chest. Okay. Homework assignment, I really want you to do this. Measure the widest part of your chest and then measure the chest circumference of a shirt that fits close to your body. Unlike a fitted shirt, this measurement should be about an inch below the armhole. Okay. Now, measure the chest of the shirt in a way that fits relaxed and loose in a way you enjoy. Okay? You might be surprised at the measurement differences between your body, the fitted shirt, and the more relaxed fit shirt. Try this again with a different measurement, like your waist. I want you to try this with many different garments. Try a tight shirt. Try a tight stretch shirt. Okay, those measurements might even be smaller than your actual body measurements. Try a boxy pajama shirt. Because listen, this difference between the body measurement and the clothing spec is what creates the fit that you want. Okay, do you want to create a boxy tee, a fitted jumpsuit, loose sweatpants, a fitted shirt? The key to understanding clothing measurements and body measurements and their relation to each other. First, I'll go over what measurements you need from your fit model to guide you in your pattern making, and then show you how to measure clothes. I'm going to show you on men and women. For women, I suggest that your fit model be wearing a brassiere because most women do wear brassieres under their clothes. And whenever you do a horizontal measurement, make sure your measuring tape is straight across, no falling back, drooping, anything like that. Make sure it's going straight across, front to back, side to side. Always make sure your measuring tape is straight and taut. And when you do things like outseam, inseam, you're not following every curve of the body. You don't really go in between the breasts. It's about going over the curves to get a basic circumference or a basic length. You will need a bust or chest circumference. Typically on a body, you're going to measure the widest part. So on women, you're going to hit apex level, okay, where it's the widest part of the bust. And with women, you also want an apex to apex measurement so that you situate your princess seams and darts in the correct places. Okay? You're going to want a waist measurement, a high hip measurement, and a low hip measurement. And typically, your high hip measurement is going to be halfway in between your waist, and your low hip should be about the widest. It should be very close to the crotch, and it should be the widest part of your hip, widest part of your bum. You need vertical measurements, so shoulder to apex, bust to waist, waist to high hip, so you have consistent measuring standards. So when someone's trying to measure the high hip and the low hip, you've already marked down, oh, high hip is here vertically in relation to everything else. You'll also need your body length. High shoulder point to ankle, often abbreviated to HSP. That's the industry standard. That's just a common abbreviation, like CF is for center front. High shoulder point is that highest point of your shoulder right at the right where it meets the neck. And this is a better vertical measurement because center fronts, you have so many different necklines that center front is not always a good indication of how long a garment is. But high shoulder point, unless you're talking about strapless, off the shoulder stuff, high shoulder point is a more consistent way of measuring the length of a garment. Let's talk legs. You want the widest part of the thigh, which is typically about 1 inch below crotch level. You want the widest part of the calf, and you should mark vertically where that was. You want the center of the knee. Okay, so usually you check out the hinge in the back and kind of wrap around to the front. And you want your ankle circumference. You want the out seam, which is the side seam of the pants. And I mistakenly kind of drew it kind of curvy. It should be straight. Just follow the hip and then let it fall straight. You want your inseam. Again, just let it fall straight. Don't curve it following the curves of the thigh and the knee and whatnot. And then you want the length of the center of the knee to the ankle, which will help you draft different skirt lengths. And, if you want to design flared pants, I know it's not a huge style trend right now, but these things always come back. So if you want to do flared pants and you want to know where to start the flare, you got to have that knee to ankle measurement. Let's talk about arms. You'll need your lengths, of course. So if you can feel the top of your humerus bone, your upper arm bone, you want to feel that knob, okay? You want the shoulder point to the elbow and then elbow to wrist. Of course, that combo measurement, shoulder to wrist. You want to measure around your armhole, kind of nice and relaxed. Don't try to squeeze it too tight or anything. And then your bicep circumference is approximately the middle of your upper arm. You want your elbow circumference and you want your wrist circumference. Next up is neck and shoulders. Now, shoulders are very important because it helps you position the armholes. And sometimes some companies, depending on what garments they make, they measure the sleeve from center back neck all the way to the wrist. Okay, so you need these shoulder measurements. So measure your shoulder width, bone top to bone top. And a lot of people like to measure shoulder width 4 inches down. So kind of where that armhole would naturally be, of 4 inches down, armhole to armhole. You'll need your neck circumference for collars. And you want the height of the neck, especially in the front where it's a bit shorter, a bit more sensitive, which is good for knowing how to make shirt collars, turtlenecks, any kind of mock turtleneck, all of those good things. Okay. And, there are some measurements where the front and the back are very different. So you can take separate measurements if your brand is really invested in the exact fit of non-stretch garments. For example, front and back armholes are often quite different. Okay. Let's say you want to dress a customer like you want to do blouses for very busty women. Do a front bust measurement and a back chest measurement. If you want to make jeans for women with really large butts, then you can do a back measurement and a front measurement with your hips. Okay, next I want to go over how to fill out a spec sheet. And you may be wondering why I have so many columns here. Okay? One of the important reasons to have spec sheets is for quality control. I'm going to go over that in a second. This main big column here is for naming or describing the part you're measuring, like sleeve length, center front, bust circumference, things like that. I have every single measurement here numbered on the sheet because sometimes if you have a lot of measurements or you just have a lot of measurements that are hard to describe in a few words, you can label it on your flat with this number. Okay. Some spec sheets, some people, they format their spec sheet so there's a flat right on the spec sheet. I prefer a separate sheet with the largest flat I could fit on the page. And then I will label certain sections for the specs, like how do you describe this? But I really do need this measurement here. There you go. Then you have your number. Now, this section is for your first sample. You fill in here the specs that you want for your garment. These are your requested specs. You send it to the factory and say, I want these specs, these measurements for my sample. Honestly, in hindsight, I should have reversed the actual and the requested, but it's not that important as long as they're labeled up here. And then you fill in the tolerance. What is tolerance? This is the industry term for the acceptable margin of error, the wiggle room. Because let's be real, this is still a bunch of human beings cutting and sewing your clothes. And so there's always going to be a little bit of margin of error. Let's say you're making a large men's jacket and you want the chest to be 51 inches around. In the tolerance column, you can say you will accept maybe half-inch tolerance, 3/4 of an inch tolerance, okay? So if you have a half-inch tolerance, that means that it's okay if when you receive the garment and you measure out the sample, it will be okay if the chest measures out 50.5 inches or 51.5 inches. And this is really important. This makes the factory accountable for spec quality. It makes them keep a tight eye on their sample making and production. You as a company set the tolerances and you set different tolerances for each measurement. The smaller the measurement, the smaller the tolerance. Like for a big measurement, like chest circumference on men's jackets, 1/2 inch is okay, 3/4 of an inch is okay. But something like a neck circumference, you might request a 1/4 inch tolerance. Or for something really small, like the width of a center front placket on a shirt, the tolerance can be 0. By the way, I use the imperial system because I grew up in the US, but it really doesn't matter if you use imperial or metric. This video is about process, not exact numbers. Now, it generally takes about 3 iterations to perfect a sample on average. Okay? So I put all these sections here, and you put the requested specs for the first sample. When you receive the first sample from the factory, you measure the garment. You have your fitting, you make all your adjustments in your newly requested specs here. And call out the ones where they didn't match your requested specs beyond tolerance. Okay? So call those out, put in your requested specs, and then you submit to the factory that you want a second sample, and so forth until you get the fit right. Now let's measure some clothes. So for a jacket, like a standard blazer, men or women, you want the length, which is your high shoulder point. You also want the center front because you want to know how low that V dips when the roll of the lapel happens. You're going to want a chest circumference, again, typically measured 1 inch below armhole. And you should mark that on your spec sheets that that's how you measure the chest circumference, because, all these things vary company to company. You want to let the factory know how you do things and how you expect things to be done, especially so that they can meet your tolerances. You're going to want a sleeve length. You're going to want an armhole. You're going to want shoulder to shoulder. You're going to want that shoulder measurement 4 inches down. You're going to want a waist measurement. And before I go further, I just want to note that I use a lot of different color dry erase markers for this part of the video, and just ignore the colors. I just switch colors when things start getting a little bit messy looking and I want to make things, everything visible and clear, but the colors don't mean anything, so ignore the actual colors. Okay? So you're gonna definitely want your hem circumference of the closed jacket, and you should write that. It's like closed jacket hem circumference is. Now, whenever you have any sort of pocket on a garment, you need to detail the dimensions. So you're going to, like for the welt pocket with a pocket flap, you're going to want the dimensions of the welt, and you're going to want the dimensions of the flap, as well as dimensions of the pocket bag inside. For the chest pocket, same thing, length, height, pocket bag. Any sort of collar and lapel, okay? And notice how I blew things up. You can do that on your tech pack, and I highly encourage it when you want to get into the details of a small part of your garment. Go ahead and just copy and paste off your Adobe Illustrator flat that pocket, that detail, so that you can really get in there with all the details. So collar width, collar length, lapel width, lapel length, those are all really important. Spacing between buttons for any kind of jacket, any kind of shirt, anything that has more than one button, really. You're spacing it, and you want to measure from the center of each button or buttonhole. With a shirt like this, I would definitely blow up the collar so that you can get in there and do the collar length, the collar width. If the point of the collar is really big, you want to detail all those lengths. If you have a 2-piece collar that has a collar stand, you want to detail how tall, you want that collar stand on the inside. You want a neck circumference. Men buy their shirts this way. Have you seen the shirts that say 15 and a half, 16 and a quarter? That's the neck fit. Again, you want to detail the pocket. Your top stitching on these kinds of patch pockets should be detailed in your tech pack. So edge stitch, little edge of triangles, maybe like another row of stitching in the middle. All these things should be detailed in a large blow up of your pocket. And you're going to want the measurement of the long length, the short length, the length of the bottom sides and the top. You see how sometimes these measurements are really hard to articulate, and why it's so good to have those numbers there. So even if you're describing them a little bit awkwardly, they're going to be like, oh, this is 14, this is 13, like that. And yeah, if you have a pocket and you have a bunch of measurements for your pocket, please group those numbers so it's easy for the factory. So like number 13 is the pocket width at top. Number 14 is the pocket length at side. Number 15 is the pocket length in the middle, and so forth like that. It just makes things easier for the factory. And then, of course, shoulder, I would mark it like point of the yoke to point of the yoke is the shoulder width measurement. Of course, high shoulder point, of course, center front. And, you want the width measurement at the hem, because a lot of men's shirts, they taper, like a big chest with a little bit of a taper. If you have a shirt tail hem, you want the measurement difference between the side seam and the center front. If your center back shirt tail is longer, then you want that as a separate measurement as well. Don't forget your sleeve length, cuff width, armhole measurements, your side seam measurements. And you're like, Zoe, this is a lot of measurements. I know. That's why I have so many slots for measurements on these charts. And I'm not making this up. There's like, I'm probably forgetting some, but I'm just kind of going over the basics to show you all the things that you need to think about when you're designing your garments and speccing things out, right? So let's move on to jeans. Always have the dimensions for your pocket bag. So you're going to need the dimensions of the pocket opening, the pocket bag depth and width, and belt loops. Anytime you do any kind of trouser or skirt with belt loops, you do need to detail the dimensions of the belt loop. How long, how wide, the finished dimensions. Okay, this is not pattern making. This is how wide you want it to end up. And then of course, in your flat, you should do a blow up of the belt loop so you can detail your top stitching. With yokes, you want the center back yoke length. You want the side seam yoke length because it's angled. Again, with pockets, you want to blow up the pocket, get all those details in there. This is your waistband measurement. And you're going to want the difference between where the bottom of your yoke is and the top of your pocket is. A lot of these jeans, the tops of their pockets are parallel to the yoke angle. Some of them are not. So in that case, you need those two measurements, one at the center, one at the side. When you have a J-stitch for your fly, you're going to want the width and length of the J-stitch. A lot of jeans, because kind of the basic style is so similar. You know, a lot of denim jean manufacturers, they really focus on the small details that make something special to them, like a J-stitch, like back pocket stitching, things like that. So do a close-up of that J-stitch if you want a double needle, if you want a single needle, if you want a special kind of colored thread, bar tacking, rivets. And you definitely want crotch measurements on any kind of trouser. You want a separate front crotch and back crotch measurements for sure. You want, you know, the thigh, the knee, the ankle circumference measurements of the pants. That determines whether you have a straight leg, you have a skinny jean, peg leg, flares, you know. That's what's going to determine that. And of course, outseam, inseam, hip circumferences, waist circumference. And finally, this dress that I sketched at the beginning of the video. Okay, so you're definitely going to need your strap dimensions, width and length. And you're going to notch on your pattern where the straps hit at the back. So in the front, they're obviously like the top of the garment, but where they get sewn into the back is really important to the fit. So you're going to have to notch that in your pattern. You're going to want your center front and your side seam. You're going to want that length of that princess seam because it kind of determines how long the garment is. I like to know the spacing between the two straps because the way they sit is going to affect the fit. And then the length of the V of the front. Also, the neck depth, I think is what they usually call it. But again, all these things described and then numbered on your measurement sheet, super helpful. Of course, your waist measurement, your overall bust circumference. And then always, when you have a zipper, you should have your zipper measurements. And remember, your zipper should always be long enough, whether you're doing a dress or a skirt or pants. You should always have a zipper that gives you enough space to open the garment and put the whole thing over your butt. You know what? I just realized I have a huge garment construction flaw in this dress, and this is why you don't design when you're this sleep deprived. If you can figure out what the heck is wrong with this dress in terms of construction, drop a comment below, okay? I can't believe I made this mistake. Oh, I'm such an amateur. Oh my God. All right, so if you see it, drop me a comment. So the skirt is a circle skirt. which is why often when I flat it, when I have something super drapey and I flat it, I will flat half of it as it's like open to help the pattern maker, and then the other side kind of as it would be seen worn on the body. Okay, but that center front length should be the same as the side seam length or really close to it. So you need those skirt dimensions as well. All right, I want to end on a couple of book recommendations while I'm still sitting here so embarrassed about my mistake. This is the Spec manual, and this is the complete guide to size, specification, and technical design. And I'll drop info in the description box for these books. I have both of these listed in my Amazon shop book recommendations. And the complete guide, the turquoise book, this one has, these are older editions. I've had these for a few years. This turquoise blue book has a new coral orange cover, but I do highly recommend both of these. I do like the complete guide a little more than the Spec manual, just because just has more information in general. But yeah, I do like both of these books. Now listen, you only need one of these, okay, for probably most of anything. So start by buying one of these, and then if you're really like missing some information, go get the other, but you don't need to buy both from the get-go. And that's that. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today and you want more garment construction centric videos in the future. It really helps my channel. Share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, drop me your questions and video requests in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.